Soman, obviously with being a good writer, there's a certain amount of mechanics to it, there's a certain amount of academics to it, but I think what makes a really great writer is what you bring to it as a human being, and that can be all that collective stuff that you dealt with growing up. As a child, you said in this small town that you always felt out of place.
I grew up on an island, which in itself is sort of a metaphor for my larger existence, I think, growing up. But, I was the only kid of color who went to my school. And so it was a strange experience of feeling like you were almost an alien on a different planet. And good and bad, bad because obviously you feel sort of ostracized and out of place, but good also because you become quite observational. And you can see the world in a much clearer way, I think, than a lot of people. And I think that ultimately fed my interest in fairy tales, the ability to tell stories that were sort of fundamental to, I don't know, what we're like as humans.
So sometimes what you can see as a curse can actually be your blessing. And so you threw yourself into a number of things. I love when you say the school awarded 11 subject awards every year. How many of those did you win?
I think I won them all for 3 years, and then the final year, I think I missed one. I think, when you don't have a community or you don't feel sort of part of something bigger, I think you just have to find an outlet. And for me, it was school, in a lot of ways, and just working really hard and sort of throwing myself into books in a lot of ways, But, ultimately you have to find out what you really are passionate about and what you really love. And luckily, I think writing was always with me.
Yeah. So it wasn't just school, but refined to writing. You say it's your first love. Got your English degree from this little school called, what is it again? Oh, Harvard University. That's right. Or MFA in film program at Columbia, and began your career as a screenwriter. Okay. So the School for Good and Evil. What a great idea. How did you come up with this?
It just sort of hit me one day. I think I was always interested in fairy tales. That was always what I loved to do. But, I felt like Disney had kind of brainwashed us into believing that the good guy always wins. And so I had this idea of, well, what if you followed the villains at the same time as you were following the heroes? And so the idea of a school where it was perfectly balanced, where you could spend half the time with the good guys and half the time with the evil guys, really just felt so attractive to me. And then I decided it would be about two best friends who get switched into the wrong schools. So, you have a princess who thinks she's meant to be in good, and of course she's dumped in evil. And you have a witch who ends up in the school for good. And this question of why they're mixed up becomes kind of the big center of the entire series to come.
Yeah, and there's a great message in that. Society expects certain things from people. Sometimes parents expect from their child certain things, and it's like, but my true love is this over here, but we want you to do this. And so it doesn't mean you can't accomplish things, that were prescribed for you. You can accomplish other things as well. All right, it's going to become a movie?
It's going to be a movie. It comes out on Netflix next year. I just spent the summer on set in Belfast. It's one of their biggest movies ever. The cast is ridiculous. It's Charlize Theron, Kerry Washington, Lawrence Fishburne, Michelle Yeoh, young Sophia Wiley, and Sophia Ann Caruso are the two young leads who get switched in the wrong schools. It's just a big movie. When I was on set to see it come to life, I was just like, whoa. It was like they built the entire school. It feels like Netflix's version of Harry Potter. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be just like a big reawakening in terms of just like a fantasy franchise, especially for Netflix.
Yeah, another thing that's come to life in the meantime is Beast and Beauty, Dangerous Tales, your book. It's interesting because, with even like Grimm's fairy tales, a lot of people don't realize that they were really meant to be for adults, right? And even in this country, this book is for 10 and up, but in, was it the UK, they're like, we're going to make this book only for adults. and part of it is that...
Yeah, it's published as an adult literary novel, which I'm not surprised by, because I think, in Europe, they understood sort of the darkness and edginess of fairy tales. And here we're sort of Disneyfied, But my goal was to go back to these original stories that have become so cliche and kind of played out, and they no longer have meaning for us. And the funny thing about fairy tales is that throughout history, from thousands of years ago, no matter what culture you were in, stories would pop up, a Cinderella story, a Snow White story, in every continent. It's just part of our DNA. We tell these stories even if we try not to, right? Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, Snow White, there's thousands of versions of these stories that just innately come back again and again. And I just thought, we need our own, So I decided, well, what if we start from scratch and pretend like we knew what the world would become now? What would those stories have looked like in the 1700s? And so I just decided to be quite ambitious and rewrite them.
Snow White, for example, we loved looking through the book, and I was like going, okay, Snow White, I bet she's not white.
She's not white. I just thought of myself growing up, and I thought, why don't we just have Snow White be the only black girl in the kingdom? And her mother names it almost her that way as an ironic kind of jab at the rest of the kingdom that doesn't even see her, as something worth like investing in or believing in or anything like that. And so the magic mirror is the only thing that is like, Snow White's the most beautiful girl in the land, and the rest of the kingdom is like, that's impossible, So my story is about finding mirrors when there are none, finding self-worth when there's no one telling you deserve it. So I think, these are lessons we all feel somewhere in our life. And I just think we need the fairy tales to teach them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also think that people get out of a book what they bring to it. When I saw Snow White in particular, my very first Halloween, I remember I was living in a foreign country and it was Halloween, and the teacher said, wear your costume. She goes, if I can't guess who you are, you'll get a piece of candy. Well, I was Snow White, and I remember walking up and then I looked down and saw my brown hands. I was the only brown girl in the classroom, and I thought, I'm never gonna get a piece of candy. She knows it's me. And then she looked at me and she goes, are you Sarah? And I was like, no, it's Debbie. And I thought, great. To your point earlier of like, you have expectations and you predict the outcome. You're not going to predict the outcome with this because you have put a twist on each one of these fairy tales, including Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, each and every story has its own twist. Beauty and the Beast is about, a beast who actually, when he was in his prince form, found it intolerable because he was so good looking that he couldn't actually have like a normal life. So as a beast, he feels relief, so everything comes with the twist of something that kind of brings us more thematically into the way things are today.
Yeah, so you didn't reinvent the wheel, but you put some really nice, shiny new rims on it. I'm going to back up to kind of where we started with how you grew up and finding writing and how important it is to let children express themselves with their own story, not one that's given to them.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, especially these days with TikTok and YouTube and all this stuff where kids, don't necessarily go to a book as their first thing. What's happening is their imagination muscles are weakening in a lot of ways because they're just being fed content and they're absorbing content instead of generating their own. And every time you read a book, that's when you're using your imagination to create the world that's specific to you. There's millions of kids who've read The School for Good and Evil, but there's millions of different versions based on the kid's imagination, So my mission in life is to get out to kids and be like, reading is the only way that you control your own imagination and you don't have stuff fed to you, and sure, it's a pain to pick up a book, but once you get in there, once you start using that muscle, it becomes stronger and stronger. And at the end of the day, you'll be the one making content one day for other people. You won't be one of those like consumer slaves who just follows what everything is fed to you, So I just think we have an epidemic in this country in terms of, books falling by the wayside, but that's the only way that we're going to train independent thinkers.
Yeah, Soman, thank you very much. And it's a great book and great for kids and parents to read together because there's lots of great lessons in here today that pertain to today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.